Namaskar, welcome to Vision of Asia, Voice of Community on ITV Gold this Sunday. As I welcome you, we all are aware about the exciting few days left between now and 3rd November when America goes to vote. We all look forward to new president. It could be the same president with new mandate, or it could be a new president, and voters are going to decide that. In today's Vision of Asia, we have all the stories somewhere related to this historic election. We'll begin with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams on coronavirus measures and election 2020. Again, in the special edition of this week with Padma Shri Dr. Sudhir Parikh, we talk about upcoming elections, and Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz has also urged South Asians to do their part for the democracy and vote. She represents District 39th of New York State Assembly. And then we have political strategist Pallavi Purkayastha addressing the same issue of election 2020 from Georgia. And we conclude with a ceremony where Indian businessman Mickey Chopra was honored in New Jersey by a Republican. And all this coming up right after these short messages. Stay with us. You're watching Vision of Asia, Voice of Community on ITV Gold, and today we begin with a special story which also is related to the upcoming presidential election. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams has been very active not only in fighting coronavirus but also in educating and sharing the significance of playing an important role in the democratic process. How coronavirus and handling of the crisis posed by coronavirus is likely to affect election 2020. Eric Adams talked about that also. Here are some excerpts from that conversation.
But let's start with COVID-19. Borough President here. You are in Brooklyn. It is one of the hardest hit areas right now with clusters of COVID-19 being seen across the borough. So just starting off this interview, I'd like to know more information about what's going on and also what kind of changes have you had to make since these clusters came around?
It's so important to really engage everyday New Yorkers to know that we play a role to prevent the reemergence of COVID-19. We've done a successful job of bringing down our numbers. We were the epicenter of COVID-19 in America several months ago, and we don't want to go backwards. And so it was identified as several locations and neighborhoods in the borough and throughout the city were considered red spots. Those are spots where there were increases. And we want to get on the ground in those areas and empower government, community residents with personal responsibilities, and making sure we get PPEs, personal protective equipment, and information on the ground to prevent the reemergence.
Yes, definitely. What is the reason of this spike, according to you? And would you say the situation right now in Brooklyn is somewhat under control with the measures you have had to take?
There are many reasons. You know, when you look at some of the communities, many of those communities are non-English speaking communities where you see the spikes. And we have made, I believe, a calculative error by not ensuring we had credible messengers on the ground in these communities to constantly remind people about COVID-19. Human behavior is not easy to change just on one notification, or if you're not notifying people in the methods in which they receive information. And some people may say, well, it has been 7 months, everyone knows about COVID-19. That is just not true. Many people know about it, but not at the same level with the constant reminders that others are receiving if you are a primarily English-speaking city. We, in the borough of Brooklyn, 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home. And so if we don't continuously communicate in many of those different languages, Urdu, Chinese, French, Creole speaking, if we don't continue to speak in those languages in the reminder phase, we could lose a potential number of people. And that is what you're seeing. There's a correlation between cultural norms and increases in COVID-19 in areas. That is not by accident.
Yes, for sure. When we are talking about this, I have to ask you, the entire nation right now is discussing the second surge of COVID-19. And now because of these clusters, some even are calling this a second surge, which is starting in New York City. Are you right now prepared for a second surge in terms of PPE, beds and ventilators? And, also, what are your biggest concerns right now with this?
Yes, here in Brooklyn, many of the hospitals and even my office, we have held a stockpile of PPE so we could immediately mobilize on the ground in those infected areas. We have spent time in some of those areas already. This morning, I was at a few train stations reminding passengers on the importance of wearing PPEs and face coverings, handing them out to passengers. And so access to personal protection equipment is so important. And we must ensure that the city has an emergency rapid response team that should be in conjunction with the police department to identify areas that you have a high level of non-compliance. Those are the types of partnerships we need to immediately identify where the problems are and get the resources on the ground in those locations.
While we are discussing that, I have to ask you, and I asked you that in our previous interview as well, what is the situation with food insecurity in your borough right now? Has it improved, or because of these clusters forming again, you're seeing that, need again?
It's a real problem. Many people who are not in senior centers, adult daycare centers, or not in school, where these were places where individuals were receiving a normal distribution of food, cooked food. And by seeing the change in how we are delivering these food services, it is impacting people in a real way. Even our food pantries. Many of our food pantries are struggling now to keep their doors open. The lack of access of not only food, but healthy food is something that we are really struggling with. We need help from the federal government. We have not been receiving a lot of support from the federal government around this issue, and it has become a real problem that has reached a crisis level.
Let me ask you this, since you mentioned the federal government already, what is exactly needed from the state government and the federal government for this borough right now, especially when you're looking at the food insecurity issue, as well as the economic crisis for the small businesses?
And you said it clearly this morning. I talked about, how do we get our city up and running so that we could address the economic crisis we're facing. And you do it in several ways. Number one, we have to build back trust in our transportation system. We have a multi-billion-dollar deficit, and many people are not using the transportation system because they don't feel comfortable enough to take the transportation system. If we don't have the comfortability of our transportation system, then people are not going to go to the central business district, which is in Manhattan. We're not going to see our retail shops open. We're not going to increase our employment. And that is why it's crucial that the federal government now ensures that we reinvest money into our cities, particularly a city like New York, which is an economic driver for the entire country. So we need funding. We need a stimulus from the federal government. I'm disappointed that the president and Congress have basically not moved at the pace that we should be moving to see the urgency on the ground. We need financial help from the federal government.
You know, while we are talking about these levels of government, I have to ask you, what do you have to say about Mayor Bill de Blasio and his handling of the situation right now? I know you were a little critical about his handling of the education system as well. I would love to get some insight into that.
Well, this was an extremely difficult situation. And if I have to say that any mayor who would have basically absorbed the thrust of a formidable opponent, COVID-19, that changes on many different levels, a lot of uncertainties, and you have to be able to respond as rapidly as we were learning about this new pandemic. And so we have to really understand the complexities of it. I think that my basic critique of what has happened is the lack of communication, consistency, and coordination between the state and city government. It's unfortunate, as I stated, we did not receive the financial support, even in the area of the PPPs, the money that came from the federal level. But at the same time, I believe we need to shift our cities into a real-time mechanism that we could better handle crises. We have to, as a city and cities across America, we must manage our assets, have an equitable distribution of resources, and the key is in real time. We didn't do that. Far too many communities did not receive resources in an equitable fashion. Many of our safety net hospitals, which are the hospitals that you treat the poorer communities, were not receiving the same level of resources. And so we did not have a fair distribution of resources in real time, and we failed to manage our assets in an appropriate fashion.
Let me ask you something real quick in following up to that. How long do you think it'll take you to get those needed resources? How many months are we looking at?
Well, we need to put it on fast track. I know that here in the city, we started having small manufacturers open businesses where we're making personal protection equipment, hospital gowns. There's a great initiative of a small company in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and there are other companies that are opening. We should incentivize the repurposing of everything from tailor shop to seamstress shops. I think there's a great opportunity to really play a dual role, infusing real resources in the economy by small businesses, and at the same time, creating the supplies we need to help us weather if there's a second surge of coronavirus.
That's such an important perspective. I'm sure the audience learned a lot from this. Let's now talk about the elections. Since I have you here, I have to ask you a couple of questions on that. My first question to you has to be about the borough of Brooklyn. Do you think they're voting right now? And if so, what issues, according to you, matter the most to the borough currently?
Yeah, I think the entire country is looking forward to the election, no matter who one is deciding to vote for, the exercising the right to vote, having a board of election system that is fair, that is competent to count every vote is crucial. But when you look at the issues that are important, people are really concerned with public safety. We have an overproliferation of handguns in our city that's leading to a real crime problem, and people are concerned about that. They're also concerned about the safety of our city. How healthy is our city to ensure not to be infected or spread coronavirus, and to make sure we have the hospital care for anyone who's actually infected by COVID-19. And lastly, employment. They're concerned about the economic status and the economic strength of our city. We have to get our small businesses up and operating again. Over 50% of the employment in our city comes from small businesses. They're the lifeblood of our city, and even the micro businesses that we're seeing going through a very difficult time. You know, it's predicted we may lose anywhere from 30 to 40% of small businesses. That is something that would really devastate our economy, and we must infuse resources and support in our small businesses.
Padma Shri Dr. Sudhir Parikh feels it is going to be a tight race. He shares all about upcoming presidential election in This Week with Padma Shri Dr. Sudhir Parikh. Take a look at this analytical insightful conversation.
Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas and I have the pleasure of welcoming Padma Shri Dr. Sudhir Parikh in this special show every week. Namaste, Doctor. Welcome.
Namaskar, namaskar.
So, as we begin today's conversation, we are even closer to US presidential elections. And let me begin by seeking your opinion on the silver lining which Republicans are seeing with reference to the number of voter registration. Do you see it is likely to prove as a game changer?
Well, I mean, it looks like election is much closer than what polls suggest. So it's anybody's game right now. And because the Republican registrations are very high, number two, lot of Democrats think that Democratic Democrat supporters are thinking that Biden is going to win because of the big margin on the poll. So they may not bother to go to poll, particularly in the pandemic. And that may affect the election result. So, and the other thing is in last 87 times out of 100, whenever the in first, just before the election, if market goes up, usually incumbent wins. So only caveat is here is the handling of the pandemic. So that's why it becomes very interesting, and we'll see what happens. Whatever happens, I think we all should vote of candidate of our choice.
Absolutely, I think that is the best advice. But as the reference of COVID-19 came, so the recent exchange of unpleasant words and feelings between US President and the infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci, do you look at it as damaging for President Trump in some way?
No, I don't think so. It's a non-event because during election campaign and the heat of the election, every day you will see some comment which one may or may not like it, may or may not agree. But that doesn't make any much difference 15 days from today.
And your thoughts on the first time in the final presidential debate, they will have the moderator given the facility of making use of the mute button. That is going to be interesting so that any candidate can express himself without any interruption from his opponent. What do you read in this new initiative?
Well, I think this new initiative, I like it actually, because that way at least the public can hear or audience can hear what candidate has to say. And I think they are not going to mute when there is an open discussion. It means there is a rebuttal. So I think that's perfect. And that way the whole thing will be more organized and there's nothing wrong in it because it can work both ways. So it is not advantage to one or other. So I think I like that idea because that way at least we can hear what the candidate has to say for 2 minutes. And then of course when then rebuttal starts and then somebody answers of the rebuttal, that time they are not going to mute it. So I think that will be interesting.
Yeah, I think we will be able to hear exactly what they want to say because last time
right.
It wasn't possible. And
no,
now,
right.
These developments as are happening as we move closer to the final day of election, the NATO has also sort of expressed if Biden wins, they are going to seek a meeting with him in the early March or something. So at this time, when people are making up their mind for either candidate, the decision about NATO as the new relationship under President Trump, do you see it as going to help him politically and Biden showing a kind of inclination towards interacting with NATO? How that's likely to play out?
I think current president also does interact with the NATO, because USA is a main kind of source of the funding of the NATO. So I think your question kind of has a meaning that current president never interact with the NATO. No, that's not true. The current president does interact with the NATO, because they have to interact with the NATO, because NATO is as an alliance to protect not only Europe, but it also protect the USA too. So it's a treaty. It's a defense treaty. So there is always communication between NATO officers and Trump administration or any administration who is in the power. So I think what you are saying is, even when when President Trump won, same time right after in couple of months, Trump went to Paris and they met, all NATO members met him. So and this NATO member also meets them in the G7 meeting and also G20 meeting. So it's not that because Biden is coming, that's why NATO members want to meet.
No.
I think
the reason I bring it up. Yeah, let me interrupt quick. Yeah, allow me a quick interruption. The reason I bring it up is because President Trump has been very critical of NATO. He has said that this Western alliance is obsolete, and he has also been very critical of some of the members of this alliance. And he, in 2018, threatened that US would pull out of NATO. So from that point of view, probably Democrats might be more favorable to NATO.
No. I think it's your wrong interpretation. What in 20 after he become a president, what he was trying to say as a part of the kind of putting pressure on the NATO members, because NATO members were not paying their dues as it was described by NATO Charter. And therefore he wanted to say that USA cannot keep funding the NATO all the time, and other country member, though they are well-to-do economically, they should contribute their share of the funding. And in order to get that funding, he was kind of saying what he was saying, that NATO is absolute, but NATO never going to be absolute, because the Western world needs NATO to defend against the communist Russia or China. So I think people are kind of reading it out of without much background understanding of the NATO. So I don't think that's true. And I think by doing that, actually, by threatening them or by pulling out from the NATO started paying their contribution. So it's a good for NATO. So other members are paying their dues now.
So the dynamics is likely to be different under President Trump as it is, and if there is a Democratic president, then that is what news reports are suggesting. But moving towards the vice presidential candidate of Democratic Party, she tweeted with her self in the rain, with umbrella, rain or shine, democracy waits for no one. That was one way of conveying that one should vote. But there is another tweet by some Democratic Party members where Kamala Harris is shown as Ma Durga. And as you are aware, Hindus all over the world are celebrating Navratri. And then President Trump in that tweet was shown, in that picture was shown as a demon. And many Hindus are upset about this being an insensitive way. How do you read? Do you read anything in this with any political ramification?
No, I think I ignore it. I mean, I just look at it as another kind of social posting. And there is definitely no ramification either way, plus or minus on the election or how they're going to vote, because this the posting has nothing to do with I mean, the majority of the American, 99% of the American probably doesn't know what we are talking, what Ma Durga and all this thing. So most of the Indian Americans are divided into two camps. And actually, so some they like the Biden and his philosophy, and some like Trump and his philosophy. So I don't think this cartoon or social posting has any meaning or any real effect on the election.
Mhm. So allow me to, allow me to stay with you, because I saw a lot of social media exchanges with many people commenting, and uh, whether it is to be treated as being insensitive to Hindus or not would, again, as you mentioned, depend on the way you look at it as a Hindu also. But there are good number of politically active Hindus now. So that is why I thought this has an interesting political kind of
No,
impact.
but I mean, look at this way. Be pragmatic in a sense that total number of votes, say there are, I don't know how many people are going to register to vote, say 100 million people, right? Out of 100 million people, how many Hindus? Less than 0.03%. So whether does it make any difference? Even somebody likes it or not like it? No, because the number is so minuscule. So, but again, of course, this kind of religious posting it's very sensitive thing, and should not be posted, because it hurts people's faith, feeling about the faith and the religion, and religion should be out of equation in the election.
Absolutely. I think that is the same way of looking at looking at it, Dr. Parikh. I agree with you on that. But now moving towards, as we are just few minutes to go, towards the financial side, and as Indian Americans are growing in their political interest as well as impact, a leading Indian American Advocacy and Political Action Committee has announced that it has raised over $10 million to support the campaign of Democratic candidate Biden. So as you were saying, Indian Americans are both sides. And this also um, makes me remember that Republicans are falling short of funds as compared to Democrats, which is interesting because usually one assumes that those who are in the power, they have more access to resources. So your analysis of this situation.
Well, again, obviously, Democrat has raised more fund because of the kind of ineffective management of the COVID by current administration. People might be, and people might be feeling that probably Democrat has better chance of winning the election. So obviously, the small contributors are contributing more to the Democrat, but they are super. What do you call? There are people who contribute not to the campaign; they contribute to the other way, to the victory fund,
Absolutely.
which has no limitations to it. So one can even contribute $1 billion, and there's no, so we don't know exactly how much each party got in their victory fund, because what they
Absolutely.
are talking about is only official fund, which is not, it cannot give you more than $5,700 per person.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as we conclude today's conversation this week with Padma Dr. Sudhir Parikh, your parting words from today's show, especially these two issues are walking with us. COVID-19 still has not left us, and then being politically aware and discharging one's duty to cast vote.
I think democracy, it's very important that we must vote. We must make sure that we exercise our rights, and doesn't matter whom we vote. It all depends upon one's choice, and I think I would encourage each and everyone to vote. And for pandemic concern, still, as I said, every last few weeks, that virus is still around us, with us. We have to be very careful. We have to be safe. We have to wear masks. We have to keep personal hygiene, and we should keep a distance from each other, and do not attend any gathering, indoor gathering, whether it's in restaurant or even private homes, because that's a super spreader of the disease. And disease has a lot of complications and a lot of sequelae, even if you recover from that. So be careful and be safe. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. God bless America. God bless India.
You're watching Vision of Asia was a community on ITV Gold, and this Sunday, as we meet, it is time to reconnect with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays at 8 p.m. We have fresh issues of Vision of Asia, and our special weekly edition of Vision of Asia comes to you every Sunday at 11 a.m. Thank you very much for your encouragement and continued support. We'll be right back after these short messages. Stay with us. Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz represents District 39th of New York State Assembly. She urged South Asians to do their part in strengthening American democracy by going out there and doing the civil duty of voting and exercising this right of being a part of electing the new president. Here is Catalina Cruz.
I'd love to know what has happened in your District 39th with Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, and Corona since the last time we spoke. What kind of changes have been there? And what are still your challenges with COVID-19?
Look, I think one of the most unfortunate things we've seen happen in our neighborhoods that represent Jackson Heights, Corona, and Elmhurst has been the terrible economic and life impact of COVID-19. We had hundreds of people die. We had hundreds of people, if thousands of people actually be infected. And we have people who have lost everything from their jobs to loved ones to their small business. And what we're trying to now do is help our community survive and move past this terrible, terrible time in our history.
Yes, for sure. In terms of that, Assemblywoman, last time we spoke about what was needed from the state and federal level in your district especially. Your district has been very badly hit as an epicenter when New York was the epicenter of this coronavirus. What is needed right now to make sure that your district doesn't become the epicenter again and to really uplift those communities that are being hurt?
I think one of the most important things that we need is to create a healthcare system where no matter how poor or rich or what the color of your skin or religion or your sexual orientation, no matter who you are, you can walk into a hospital, you can get preventative health care, you can get health care if you have an emergency and not end up broke. We do not have that right now. We need to make sure that every single one of us can go and get the health care they need. I think the second thing that our state needs to do is create a system where every single one of my neighbors can go to a place where they can get food. Right now, if some of our neighbors lose their jobs, they have to go to a food line where they have to basically depend on charity. And in a country as, how shall we say, as wealthy as the United States, why should anyone depend on their daily food intake on charity? And I think the third thing that the state and the federal government need to do for our community is make sure that people can stay in their homes. Right now, there's folks who owe 6, maybe more months of overdue rent because they've lost their job. And that's not going to change unless they have an actual other job. And until we're able to give them the financial security that they deserve. Does that mean cancel rent while also helping small landlords maintain their buildings? That's one choice. Does that mean making sure that we're helping people pay their mortgage as well as their rent? That's another choice. For me, what matters is ensuring that people have food, healthcare, and a place to live.
Yeah. That is so important. We're just asking for basic needs right there, Assemblywoman. That's not a lot to ask for, the population that lives in the United States. How do you think the state government and the local governments have handled COVID-19 crisis in your district so far?
Not great. I think there were things that were done that were very needed and had positive impact. But in a community like mine, sometimes it came too little too late. For example, help was sent to our local hospitals eventually. But in the beginning, Elmhurst Hospital was so overwhelmed that we had people making lines outside just to get a COVID test. That we had doctors, nurses, and staff that were working around the clock, not being able to see their families and their loved ones because there was not enough medical professionals to help our community. And so while the state acted, while the city acted, they didn't act on time and enough.
Yeah, when you're looking at these ongoing clusters of COVID-19 that are breaking out in New York City, Queens has been impacted, Brooklyn has been impacted. Are you worried and concerned about that impacting your district? And is the district ready right now, Assemblywoman, to handle a surge of cases if it happens?
Look, I think first there's that whole concept of herd immunity. I don't want people to hear, oh, well, most of our community already had COVID. Perhaps we're not going to get it again. We don't know if you can be sick twice. We don't know that yet. We think that it's not a possibility, but I don't want to find out. I want the members of my community to continue to wear a mask, stand 6 feet apart, make sure they're washing their hands, and don't go out unless you really, really need to. And that means for food, that means for work. And so I think Jackson Heights, Corona, and Elmhurst have had it so difficult that we already know what needs to get done. And it's very few times that that I see some of our neighbors not following those rules. It isn't like in other neighborhoods where people are fighting about having to wear a mask. No, here, we always know that we have to wear a mask. And so we have become so accustomed to that behavior that I think we are better prepared than when COVID hit us the first time.
Is there enough PPE supplies in your district right now?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it would depend on how severe it is this time around. I have not seen a shortage. I haven't seen. There was a time when COVID first hit that people couldn't find gloves, they couldn't find hand sanitizers, they couldn't find masks. I don't see that happening. I don't want to guess and say that there's not a shortage, but I'm not seeing it.
Yes, definitely. I want to take this part of the interview now, Assemblywoman, and discuss what's happening in the nation with elections, but especially you are running for re-elections right now for your district. Just starting off, a little conversation on that. What are some of your key issues that you're still fighting for? And, when you look at your reign as the Assemblywoman, are you content with the changes that were made under you?
So I don't want to look at it as a reign because I'm not a queen. I want to look at it, although it is a very a good way to think of things, I want to look at it as the 2 years that I've been fighting for our community. And so during those 2 years, we've had great advances. We have driver's licenses for all. We have the DREAM Act. We passed legislation to protect workers' rights, to protect tenants. We fought really, really tough battles to make sure that our community has the resources that it needs. Thankfully, I won the Democratic primary back in June, and I do not have a Republican opponent. So technically, it's almost like I already won, but I don't take anything for granted, and I keep inviting people to go out and exercise their right to vote, because it isn't just about me. There's also a Senate race, a congressional race, a presidential race, and we want to make sure that every single member of our community goes out and votes. And I'll tell you, the first time I ran, I learned something incredibly powerful about the South Asian vote. The number of people that came out to support me, and I venture to say one of the main reasons I won is because I reached out to the South Asian community. I reached out as an immigrant, as a worker, as a woman who wanted to fight for the rights of the underserved. And the South Asian community has been extremely kind to me. And I want them to go out and vote, because what I know about their power, their elected power, I want everybody else to find out. I want everyone else to see that when the South Asian community comes out and votes, you can change history.
Political strategist Pallavi has been very, very active and vocal in giving voice to the concerns of South Asian community, as well as highlighting the importance of being an active participant in the American system. She also addressed election 2020 and the significance of South Asian voice in Georgia. Here are some highlights from that address.
We had to bring you back on ITV Gold because we are less than 15 days from the election, the presidential elections on November 3rd. There's so much to discuss, and you are in Georgia. So let's begin this interview discussing a little bit about what's happening there in the state. What kind of insight could you tell us about how the Democratic and the Republican parties are doing in the state of Georgia? And have you seen any changes from 2016 so far in the state?
Oh, absolutely. There is a huge difference between 2016, even looking at 2018, what the election of Trump kind of did to the midterms. We have surpassed way over 1 million early voters, which hasn't happened in a very long time. I truly believe this is going to be the high water mark in terms of voter turnout this year. And a lot of it is happening because people are taking advantage of early voting. They are making sure that they're mailing in their ballots. And if you look across the state, the Democratic participation is through the roof. By the time election day comes around, I expect both sides to have increased participation because it's a very high energy, it's a very emotive election cycle, but I am definitely seeing just a lot of energy throughout the state, definitely in Metro Atlanta, definitely in the suburbs, which have been feeling the need to move away from the Republican Party. We see a lot of former Republicans now being very vocal about not just voting for Biden, but voting for Democrats down the ballot. So it's a very high participation year, and I'm excited to see what the numbers look like at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd.
For sure. When we are looking at Georgia, Pallavi, traditionally the state has been voting red for as long as we could remember. Do you see a good chance for the state to turn blue this year?
Absolutely. We talk about trends, and we know that it's been maybe about 2 decades since Democrats had control of Georgia. Roy Barnes, I believe, is the last Democratic governor that we had. And you just look at what's been happening every 2 years. In 2014, Michelle Nunn and Jason Carter were on the ticket. They received about 45%. Hillary Clinton fell short by about 5 points. Stacey Abrams fell short by about 1.5 points. And you see the state gradually get younger, gradually get more and more diverse, and you see a lot of Republicans leaving their parties and voting for Democrats now, and you see that trend happening in a way that this year Georgia is absolutely in play. I had the honor of speaking at an event where Doug Emhoff, who will, I believe, be the next second gentleman, who's Kamala Harris's husband, he was here to talk about voter turnout, and you see these presidential tickets put in time, put in resources into Georgia. You can't watch 30 minutes of TV without seeing an ad from Joe Biden. And that shows you that if they're willing to put in the resources, they're seeing something in their polling that suggests that if we put in enough resources, we could absolutely turn Georgia blue. And I feel honored that we've done the groundwork for years and years to get us to this spot right now, and that the Democratic Party is putting in the money, is putting in the manpower to make sure we can get beyond that 50.1% mark that we need to get beyond.
Definitely. What issues matter the most in Georgia, according to you, Pallavi?
Healthcare. It's up and down healthcare. I feel like one of the reasons why we're doing so well is because the people on the other side of the aisle are trying so hard to push this defund the police narrative, which simply isn't working because most Democratic candidates are not for it. And they're trying to focus really into the looting and the rioting. And every person I know has condemned that. Every person I know is is standing up for non-violent protesters, the right to get your voices heard. And what I've seen on the ground is people are much more afraid of losing their health care or being in financial ruin because of an illness than they are about their neighborhood Starbucks getting looted. And now you're seeing the rise, even with the White House at one point said Georgia was leading the nation in infection rates. Every single person who had the coronavirus is now considered a pre-existing condition. And you see the ACA being debated about if it should be struck down or not. And people are genuinely worried that a small surgery, a small illness could financially ruin their families. And there are people who have political power to stop that and are simply not doing it. So up and down, anywhere I go, healthcare is the biggest thing. People are worried about what the virus is going to do. They're worried about if they'll be able to get their jobs back because they lost it due to the pandemic. And they're generally worried about if they can afford to get sick. And that's, we've made sure that they know that the Democratic Party is the party that wants to expand Medicaid, wants to make sure that people who don't normally have the resources to go to a doctor, that they don't get bankrupt because of one illness.
Definitely. I mean, we've all seen the ramifications on healthcare system, especially during COVID-19. And we are still looking for an answer to what to do about this healthcare system. Pallavi, let's talk about elections on a broader term here, because I also want to educate our audience in all of the states here that are located in the United States, but also talk about issues that are impacting everyone. Let's start this off by just discussing the most significant voters in this election. Who do you think are the most significant voters or new voters in this election that could maybe change the outcome? And how do you educate those voters the most?
It's hard to pinpoint the most significant voters. At the end of the day, any election in Georgia is won when you hit that 50% plus one mark. So your margin of victory could be your base, or it could be a specific demographic, or it could be new Americans who have never voted before. It could be newly engaged Americans who have never voted before. So depending on the region, I don't believe there's a specific demographic that we need to go after. But what I do think is extremely important is making sure that everybody who wants to vote is able to vote. Here in Georgia, the very first day of early voting, my dad stood in line for almost 3 hours. People were getting turned away for being at the wrong polling precinct when there is no right polling precinct within a county for early voting. There were areas in Cobb County where people were standing for 9, 10, 11 hours in line just to vote. Those tactics are really what we need to be looking at, because at the end of the day, whether it's incompetence, whether it's malice, nobody should have to wait in line for 8 hours to cast their ballots. So in terms of who's the significant population, it's every person who wants to go vote, and whether they're being able to cast their ballot in an appropriate manner of time. It's one thing to wait 30 minutes. It's another thing to tell somebody that they have to give up the entire day and stand in line just to exercise their First Amendment rights. So that would be my answer to what's significant. It's the ability to be able to vote.
There are many Indians who are actively working with Republican Party, and indeed there are others who are supportive of Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Here in New Jersey, Indian American businessman Mickey Chopra was honored by Republicans. Here are some highlights from that event.
First of all, thank you ITV Gold to covering this event. This event was organized by Morris County Republican Committee. Thank you to Laura Ali. We also have a John Pence here, who's a nephew of Vice President, who came to bestow the award. I'm being honored for Small Businessman of the Year in Morris County by doing a lot of community work and other things that are going on in the town and all over the city. We do a lot of food drives, so we just wanted to thank you everybody for coming down. We had Doug Steinhardt came in. We have a John Bramnick here, Laura Ali, my hometown mayor, John Mulligan was here. So we had a lot of support, which is very good. I'm very proud to be. I have my own family here, my daughter, my son. They both were here to support me. We had people all over from Morris County came in to support. And I thank again to ITV Gold to doing the coverage. And thank you. and have yourself a very, very good night. Thank you.
I'm here to support Mickey Chopra, who's an outstanding, incredible business person, citizen, and great human being. I'm here in Randolph to support the Randolph Republican Party and to salute America. I'm John Bramnick. I'm the Assembly Republican leader, and I'm very proud to be part of such a great evening here in Randolph, New Jersey.
Now we're looking at a red tide, and it's got to come through. It's got to come through to support our president, to support our local candidates, our congressional candidates, and people who want to be like Mickey and have the future that he had in this country, the past and future that he has now in this country, because he worked so hard, he went through so much, and he continued to struggle. My family had that same kind of story. My father was born here in this country from Poland. He had nothing handed to him. He had to survive through everything on his own. He had to put himself through school. He had to build a business. So when I hear somebody like Mickey who lived through the same thing and watched him succeed, it's fabulous. And I'm so proud to be here tonight to honor this man and to count him as a friend. And I also want to thank ITV Gold for being here tonight and for having me and Mickey and everyone that has spoken earlier tonight.
So, you know what, we're having a terrific event here tonight. This is the Morris County Republican Party, and we're so happy. We've had an amazing turnout, but we also had John Bramnick, who gave us a great comedian show. We had a lovely gentleman who received a small business award, and now we have John Pence. John Pence, the nephew of Vice President Pence, who's here speaking to us about the president's goals, his future, and his accomplishments. And we have folks that are completely charged up to go out tomorrow and make sure that we do everything we can here in New Jersey to help win these races.
Hi, I'm Tom Mulligan, Mayor of Rockaway Borough, New Jersey, and I'd like to thank ITV Gold for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Mickey Chopra, who we're here tonight to celebrate as the Small Businessman of the Year in Morris County, given to by the Morris County Republican Committee. You know, we are here tonight honoring Mickey, but also the leadership of the Republican Party in Morris County, as well as Mr. Pence, who is speaking right now. You know, Mickey and I have been together many years, within Rockaway Borough, with our children, within recreation, obviously myself growing, through the town into politics, but also watching Mickey grow as a businessman and the leader he is today. I would like to thank ITV Gold once again for this.
Thank you to ITV Gold for coming out to Morris County. We're so honored to have Mickey here tonight with us and receive our first ever award for the Small Businessman of the Year. We're so proud of him. He's a great, great friend. He's a wonderful human being and a brilliant business owner, and he contributes significantly to the Morris County economy. So we're really proud to offer him this award tonight. We think it's the beginning of a lot of great things in his future. So thank you. So we're thrilled to have this many people from Morris County. We know it's a crazy time with the COVID and all kinds of stuff going on, but we're really excited about the election. We're excited to get people together. We're excited to have people collaborate and bond and talk about the future and hopeful things.
I'm from Jefferson Township, New Jersey in Morris County, and I'm supporting Bob Birmingham, Jay Dunham, and Ron Smith for the Township Council. These are folks that are going to put Jefferson first. They put their community first. They put their neighbors above politics, and I am going to support them 100% on Election Day. And I hope you return your ballot as soon as possible for Bob Birmingham, Jay Dunham, and Ron Smith for Township Council. So my name is Jade Kohut. I'm the chairperson from Jefferson Township. I'm the chair of the Jefferson GOP. And like I said, I'm going to be supporting Bob Birmingham, Jay Dunham, and Ron Smith for Township Council. They're phenomenal people, and they're going to put your community first.
And now, before we conclude today's Vision of Asia, here's a time to remind you about an opportunity that awaits you on Facebook. Yes, be friends with ITV Gold on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. ITV Gold has a lot to offer on that channel also. Keep writing to us. events@itvgold.com is simple and easy to remember email for sharing all your response information and details about upcoming events. Once again, the email ID is events@itvgold.com. Thank you very much for being a part of Vision of Asia today, and stay safe, take care. This is Ashok Vyas.